Welcome, everybody. My name is Maria Llanos. I am here with the NCEO as the events assistant. Today, we are jumping into a wonderful presentation. I am joined by Todd and Bill from Strategic Talent Partners. We're going to be going over some ESOP leadership, evaluating and hiring with a purpose. Before we jump in, I'm going to go over just some quick housekeeping things, answer any questions you might have, and we'll jump in. We always like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. They are the ones that give us the opportunity to provide such wonderful educational content to you all on our fabulous Hour Tuesday slot. As a reminder, these webinars are free for anybody who is an NCEO member. If you've got questions about that membership, you can contact here either of these contacts. They are wonderful and they can help you with any questions you might have. For our questions today, if you'll look to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button. It's called Q&A. That's where we'll ask you to put your questions that relate to the presentation. We welcome those. Please shoot those out as they come, and we'll be watching and making sure those get answered. If we miss anything, never fear. We will follow up, and you will be able to contact any of us afterwards. For CE this week's webinar is eligible for SHRM Engineering credit. In order to get that credit, you'll see 3 polling questions pop up today. You must answer all 3 of those to get the credit. Doesn't have to be correct in any sense. And then you must also stay for the full 60 minutes of the webinar. Any questions about that, you can send me a message in the chat. You can contact our event help email XYZ. For the slides today, if you'd like to follow along or download them after, those are available to you. You'll go to our website, events, webinars. You'll find today's webinar. They'll be there. Any trouble with that, I can shoot you the link as well. On that same page is where we will upload our recording of today's webinar, so you can go over anything you missed or follow up with any content you'd like to see again. Last but not least, I'll shout out a few things coming up. This Thursday, we've got a community conversation. Those are open to anybody. You do not have to be a member of the NCEO. So share that along with anybody that might be interested. We're going over EO month, which is October. And then next week, a different webinar, ESOPs and estate planning. That's next Tuesday. And of course, looking forward to this, end of August, we're going to have our forum there in Philadelphia. The link to register is there below. You'll see I can send you any information you might need and answer any questions. I will meet many and see many of you in person, so I'm looking forward to that. With that, I will pass it over to our presenters. I'll be here kind of in the background, ready to answer any questions people might have. And Bill and Todd, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Maria. Appreciate that. Ooh. Just pulling up the screen here. I think we're good. Correct. So as Maria said, I'm Todd Johnson, otherwise known as TJ. So you may hear Bill reference me as TJ through the course of today's presentation. Really at this point in my life, don't care, Todd, TJ, whatever, but a lot of people know me as both. So Bill and I come from Strategic Talent Partners. We are a retained executive search firm out of the Minneapolis, St. Paul area that work with several ESOPs across the country on hiring and retaining leadership talent. Bill himself has been in and around the C-suite level through his, I don't know, Bill, the last 15, 20 years of your career, and has transitioned to helping place executives at various levels for various businesses. And I've been in and around this space for the last 10, 11 years of my career. So we're super excited to meet with you all today and chat through some things to think about in terms of hiring leadership talent inside ESOP organizations.
Yeah, thanks, TJ. I really appreciate it. And Maria, thanks for having us too. It's fun to chat a little bit today just about the growth trajectory of businesses, right? So the things that we're really excited about, helping companies grow and getting the right leadership team in place to do that. And so, hopefully you can get a couple nuggets from today's discussion and really apply that to your organization as you continue to grow and scale through succession for your leaders, for the business and the growth trajectory that's out there today. So should be a fun topic.
Awesome. Just real quick, follow up a little bit about us. As I said, we work with ESOPs, but also privately held high growth companies. So if you're transitioning to ESOP or you're recently new to the ESOP space, that's certainly still within our wheelhouse. And like I said, we help you find, retain, and work with that leadership talent. Typically at the C-suite, VP, director, manager level, and we also attack some board search as well. But that's enough about us. Let's transition into the first polling question of the day.
Great. For everybody who might be new here, this is our first of 3 polling questions today, and I will read it out for everybody. So, how confident are you that your current leadership team can drive your 5-year growth goals? Those answer choices are below. What we'll do today is I'll leave these polling questions up for about a minute or until we've got majority answered, and then we'll share out the results quick to go over any of the content here. This is required if you're looking for CE. You'll hear me say that a million times, but I just like to make it clear. Looks like I've got 84% of you answered, so I'll give it probably another 10 to 15 seconds before we close this one out and jump in today. We're gonna do last call here, looking for 8 more of you. Great, I'm gonna close that out here. And then share out these results for everybody to see.
There you go. Bill, you want to chat through it?
Awesome. Yeah, it looks great. So really powerful up front. I'm very confident, somewhat confident. This is great. It's just a good thing to start, just to kind of get your mind right, really, about today's discussion. And if we'll transition a little bit, and this is really for any leadership team member in the ESOP world. So ESOPs are unique, right? But they're also a business, and all businesses kind of run on different functioning pieces, and one is that visioning mode, right? So how are we visioning what the company looks like in the future? So I want you to just kind of set your mind today to think about that and really start thinking about, what does my leadership team look like to get us to that 5-year goal, right? Hey, number one, have we set our 5-year goals, maybe even a 3 and 5-year and a 10-year plan? Right? What does that look like? What are we at from a top line perspective? Bottom line, what kind of value do we bring to the organization or to the marketplace for the organization? What's our culture need to be to really resonate with that growth trajectory, and how the different components of our organization are going to resonate together to really hit that area. So later today, we're going to talk a little bit about some tools that we use to help size this for you and right size it. And so that you can think about your leadership team, think about your infrastructure, and start to put some plans in place on when the right time to continue to look at your overall infrastructure is going to support that trajectory. Okay.
Yeah, so how do we kind of do that at the forefront? It's really kind of understanding where your organization is at. And we like to look at revenue as kind of a benchmark of these steps as to where the business is at from a growth standpoint. Revenue is just one side of it. You could also look at employee headcount as another measure. But there's really these kind of stair steps as you work through your business in terms of growth and complexity to what that leadership level needs to look like. But also you could look at it more holistically than that as your whole employee base and where their strengths, weaknesses, and all those types of things. And we can kind of break down those things into segments. As you all know, all businesses kind of start somewhere, right? A lot of ESOPs get beyond this foundational piece as they become an ESOP into the emerging and scaling side of things, but each step along the way changes what that org structure looks like, direct reports, and an overall, management team across the board. So in its simplest form, an org chart at a foundational level might look like this, right? Whereas there's a CEO at the top, pretty high functional areas and in kind of an operation seat in this example. Also finance, sales, and marketing from a leadership perspective. So relatively simple when you're in that foundational mode in terms of overhead. These are examples of maybe types of organizations and industries as to where the business might be at that point in time. As you grow into emerging, you can see the headcount grows. So with the headcount grows, what we're trying to illustrate here is a little more complexity. Complexity in terms of hiring, complexity in terms of obviously developing that future talent from within. Then you have to start to consider, where are my gaps and where am I starting to look out, like Bill said, in the visioning side, 3 to 5 years, what is my business going to look like? We came from foundational to emerging. How do we get from emerging to scaling? And what do we have to think about in terms of our people side of things as we go from 10 million to 20 million, 20 million to 30 million? All those roles become a little more complex. So a good exercise for this is kind of looking at that future org chart and really understanding, if we're an emerging business today or we're in that category, what is it going to take for us to get to that scaling business? And what type of headcount do we need? What type of leaders do we need? New positions that are added. As you can see in this example, there's leaders of leaders that start to form in the marketing and sales bucket, as well as the operations bucket. So we really need to consider how are we, not only developing that talent, but finding that talent out in the marketplace as you get into the scaling side of things.
Great, everybody. That brings us to our polling question. Number 2, that question reads out, how confident are you in your current leadership's ability to guide the company through its next growth phase? Those answer choices are below to gauge your comfortability. Again, same process. If you're looking for CE, this polling question is required. Already got 70% of you answered, which is really positive. Again, if you've got questions, we do welcome those. You'll see you can put those in the Q&A box, and we will make sure to watch for those and get them answered for you. That's what we are here for today, is to be the learning resources that you need. I've got 90% of you answered here. I'll do another 10 seconds. Last call here to answer this second polling question. Great, and we will move along.
Awesome.
Great responses as well. So that's somewhat confident. Looks like the biggest chunk, which is great. And I think all the companies that we talk to usually land in that area. It's like, yeah, I think so, but I'm not quite sure. How do you measure that, right? How do you really know? We do our strategic planning. We talk about the skills that are needed. We know where we're going. We've dreamt where we're going. We've outlined it, but what's the reality and how does that work? So I want to share just a couple of tools with you that may help you in this realm as well, to really kind of talk through this with your leadership team and your overall employee owners as well. This is a great example. So this is just one position. We built this. This is called the SDP Continuum, and that Strategic Talent Partners Continuum, really around a kind of a chief operating officer or maybe an integrator role title, VP of operations type of role. So kind of the number 2 in the organization, really kind of helping to manage a lot of the things that are going on. And it's different, right? It's different in each size organization, and it's different needs and different things that you need along the way. And so I just want to take you through this really quickly and just give you a sizing opportunity. So if, like TJ talked a little bit before on kind of the org structure, So when you look at the bottom of this, the V is the visionary and that CEO. I is an integrator. This is some US language, but it doesn't have to be that way. So really you're looking at that org structure is kind of growing and developing as it moves from left to right in the continuum, right? So that's kind of the basic piece. But what I want to do is break this down a little further. TJ, if you can go to the next slide. The piece really here, there's a lot of different opportunities that come into this, right? Like, what are your growth goals? How involved is that CEO? If you're really one of the companies that are a little bit smaller and you're sitting in that founder seat or CEO seat, if you're a foundational company, you're doing a lot, right? So, and that continues to grow and scale over time as your company grows and scale. You bring out your org chart and your accountability chart and all the different things that really build that infrastructure. So what is that visionary or CEO's involvement moving forward? Also when you're looking at bringing on higher level executives in your organization, the organization needs to be profitable to support that as well. So as the company grows and scales and you're looking for a little deeper skill set and experience, that's going to drive a little bit more of a financial obligation from the company. So this is just some cues on kind of what this looks like, right? So you can take this piece and we can, like I said, we could build this for really any position in your organization. And I encourage you to do that too. But let's put the focus on the integrator or the chief operating officer role. And so this is kind of that left side. Manage PPM means your kind of people process metrics, right? So this person's going to come in and really help you make sure the kind of the trains are on time, right? Make sure there's accountability pieces, run team meetings, making sure that everything kind of coalesces into one organization, okay? As your company grows and scales, you need more, right? So kind of back to that structure that we talked about before, your structure is getting more complex, your demands are getting more complex, there's more people to manage, right? So maybe you need someone with a little bit more of that people development skill set, right? So these kind of build on each other a little bit from left to right as well. This is someone that's going to come in and really help you coach and mentor your team. One of the awesome things about ESOPs is we want to encourage longevity. We want to encourage succession. We want to encourage to build our team from within as well. And so that we need that good coach, that good mentor, developing our team, right? So, and this person probably could take on some of the smaller projects that are, they've got experience in this area, maybe some functional things or some shorter time frames that are really important for the organization to move forward. Okay. Again, next level leader is going to kind of look like this org development leader, right? So this is one that's really going to be starting to be a lot more strategic thinker, right? So this person can really help us think through right structure, right seats, and I say, hey, let's make sure we make that right hire and that right growth piece when we're not taking a big chunk out of the bottom line, right? So this person's really operating from a strategic level and getting cohesion with the team and moving things forward. Okay. Your next level leader, I'd say that's kind of the middle piece, right? So now that next level leader is going to be your business planning person, right? So this is someone that's really coming from most likely a larger organization for than yours in the development. The cool thing is they've kind of navigated the growth waters. They're seeing they'll see some of the rough waters ahead and they'll say, hey, we can take this route to get around those. They're going to really provide that value for you in the aspect of we've been there, done that, and here's how we can do some things to make us even better. So talking a lot more strategy, more market trends, what are we doing from a product or service offerings to really help enhance and grow our organization on a very bigger scale. Okay. Below you'll see this is larger project stuff too, right? So maybe big enterprise-wide stuff, or we're going multi-site, or we're flipping an ERP, something really critical to the organization that this person's going to grow and lead, right? So you can't really kind of learn that on the fly. You got to come with some experience, especially in a growing company, especially when you're going from foundational to emerging, scaling. Those are such an important experience items that need to be there with this leader for you. Okay. And the last person is this advisor role, right? So this is really that thought partner or vision collaborator. This is someone, again, that's going to come from a large organization, maybe running a bigger, from a large company, but running a division of that company. So that's really important as well, right? So they have the ability to relate on and scale, but also have some opportunities to continue to grow and scale the organization because they've been exposed to that, right? So this is that thought advisor. This is a lot of times we see, the CEO starting to back out even more, and this advisor is kind of taking even more role with the organization. So again, just try to set your mind straight. Just one little thing that I obviously can't answer today, but you can do for yourself. Where would you plot your need here? So think about your chief operating officer. Think about your CFOs. Think about your VP of operations. Think about your HR leaders, right? So where would they fall in this kind of continuum? And where would you want them to be? Not for today, okay? So you only have the good insight of where you are today, but think about, what do I need on 3 and 5 years and in 10 years? And how do we get those people there? And how, if we need to, how do we get to that next level pieces? Because you may not have this role in place yet either. If you're an emerging, organization, you might not have that next layer of leadership like TJ was talking about before, right? So what does that size look like and where can we go?
Right. And again, I think just to reiterate something that Bill had hit on there, we were using this as a COO example, but this is applicable really across the board, right? As you think about that structure in its simplest form, or a foundational, call it sales manager, might be on the left where they're implementing KPIs, metrics, process for the first time. And then as the organization grows into emerging, right, they have to start thinking bigger, right, in terms of personnel and people. And do I need inside sales, outside sales? How do I add those layers into my role? And then all the way to the right, it's like, okay, now we're implementing a new CRM tool. And can that same manager that started on the left maybe 3 to 5 years ago get us to that implementation process, manage the people, still manage the KPIs and metrics? Maybe, and hopefully, right? We always want to develop from within, but it's a good time to level set of like, can that person get us there, and are they being effective in the seat is essentially what we're looking for. And if they're not, we want it's a good foray into the next slide of how do we think about that effectiveness of an ESOP leader. And Bill loves this pie chart, and so do I, and I'll let him speak to it.
Yeah, just one other quick comment on yours, TJ, which are awesome. The piece of the timing is so important, and it's kind of the analogy, like you don't want to buy the dump truck when you need to pick up, or right? So it's timing, it's sizing, it's not always going outside, right? How can you do that within? How can you grow that as well? And so those key pieces are so important. And it leads to this, right? Like, how do you do it? A lot of people always ask me, like, what's your niche? What do you do to identify ESOP leaders? And ESOPs are different, right? And so there's really an important piece there that makes a huge opportunity for the right leaders to come into the ESOPs. And it's kind of these 3 pieces at the top, right? So what you really want to understand is your unique culture and core values. And as an ESOP in general, I know that there's a lot of work being done around that. And so you need to embrace it. You need to understand it. You need to make sure that we're, making hiring decisions on that as well. And promotional decisions on it as well. And so that's going to be super important to be outlined and talked about in meetings all the time. Revisit it constantly. Okay. That gives you the foundation. The other piece is the skills and competence, right? And TJ is going to jump into some of this a little more in detail to give you some clues on how to look at this. But overall, skills and competence is something you can see on their resume, right? Like something that you can work with them. You can see their trajectory. You can see the experiences they've had. And so there's a way to flush that out though, because resumes can be a little, they may or may not be totally accurate. They may or not be representing things really well. So I think the techniques that we're going to talk to you about later are going to help with that too, to continue to flush that, right?
Yeah.
Ask great behavioral questions. Make sure you're getting those experiences communicated back to you to expose that skills and competence. And then lastly is the ESOP leadership qualities. Okay, these are kind of no-brainers, and people I say, gosh, doesn't every company really want that? But it's like your leadership team really needs to have a low ego, high self-esteem, right? So that's going to be really important. Consistent communicators, right? So they got to be talking all the time. They have to be communicating vision, strategy, expectations, accountability, all of those pieces, right? Communication is key. A people developer is always really great in that. In the ESOP world, like I said, we want to grow our folks within. We want people to stay. We want this longevity piece here. That's the driving force of the ESOP. And so how are we going to develop those people? And we do that a lot with listening, right? So that active listening is so important. And the last one is the decision maker, right? So I think one of those key attributes is someone that can really kind of put those four together up top. And where I see people struggle in the ESOP world and leadership, they have kind of those top four, but they don't have that piece of really making the decision and moving at the right time. And so that's always a trick in leadership, no matter what, ESOP or not. But it makes a big difference, kind of keeping things moving. So those pieces are so important, and excited for TJ to jump into some more detail on those.
Yeah, so kind of the next piece of this is matching up that skills and competence, really digging in. Okay, great. What, like Bill said, what should I be looking for? Resumes look fantastic, experience looks fantastic, but how do I dig? How do I get kind of under the covers of the makeup of this person and then matching that with the ESOP leadership qualities? So what we did here is kind of segmented those things out in terms of how you can look at it or think about it, whether it's a vetting process, whether you're interviewing an internal candidate or external candidate for a leadership position. These are things that you should think about and use as kind of a barometer of this person's going to get us to that next level, or this person might need some more development, or this person isn't quite there yet. And so from a skill set perspective, some of the things that we recommend that you take into account, Bill just hit on this, is in the upper left there is take decisive action, right? Like how do they anticipate problems? How do they really lead change? Can they think big picture beyond the tactical day-to-day things that need to get done? And again, sometimes these roles are both tactical and strategic, oftentimes, but the ability to really understand the vision and bring that vision to life is something that is going to be important inside an ESOP organization. And then how do they leverage the data to make some of those decisions and build their case study? Because in ESOP environments, we don't want anybody making decisions in a silo. And that's perfect into, transition into unstoppable collaboration, where it's not going to be one person making a decision inside these environments, right? They're going to have to work cross-functionally with their direct reports, understand and get the pulse of the front line, and really create those clear accountabilities, clear expectations for not only their team members, but also how they're going to communicate up, down, and across an organization. And there's going to be times where somebody has to go toe to toe. How do they manage that conflict, and are they respectful and show appreciation and gratitude when they should? But also approach that conflict in the right way versus being cancer to the culture, right? And really, being contentious all the time in meetings. And then are they solid at providing, coaching and feedback? Lastly is kind of that building relationships inside an organization. We want leaders that are going to be with ESOPs, help that share price grow year over year, show really good tenure inside the organization, and really understand not only the short term but long term goals of an organization, and build teams and relationships around them that will help everybody win inside the organization. And then are they self-aware? The resiliency side of it, not every day is going to look alike inside these organizations. It's not always going to be duckies and bunnies, as I like to say. So how do they be resilient when there's market changes or there's tariffs that come into the fold that we have to deal with, and how do we pivot and change when we need to, using a real life 2024, 2025 example. And then do they have that growth mindset? Do they really understand the vision and where we're going? And if are they participating in the quarterly and annual all employee meetings and all engagement committees and different things like that that are available inside ESOPs. So how do we ask the right questions? I won't go through this, bullet by bullet for each of these, but these are things that we recommend you think about as you're vetting these individuals. Why it's important that this person does take decisive action, right? Like we want like Bill mentioned before, timely informed decisions are really effective of those companies that can take those growth stages on. They need leaders that can really see it and bring it to life and make those decisions when they need to. But again, we're not making those decisions in the silo. So, asking questions around, making candidates, whether it's again, internal or external, cite examples, how they made decisions when they needed to around certain projects or implementations, but also how did they pull others into those decisions and make sound decisions and build cases around that, are things that we typically recommend to talent acquisition or HR folks. What does it look like, right? What's best for the customer or client or service, or if we're in a field ops role, how are we taking their feedback into consideration and making some decisions around that? And then being positive and productive. Even if, there are situations that are outside your control, how do you pivot? How do you adapt? How do you change to those environments and anything that's growing that's outside their control, but they yet have to make some decisions on to keep the organization moving forward. Bill, anything to add on this piece in terms of what you recommend executives or leaders think about as they're vetting maybe some of the decisive action side of things?
Yeah, you bet. It's just really spending a lot of time and, making sure that those behavioral discussions are happening. That's showing you in their background that they're able to step up and make a decision when they need to. It's delicate. It's hard to get to. I wish there was a single thing that we could point to say that this is the right answer and this will guarantee they can do that. But it's also, as you're talking to these candidates, internal and external, right, for new roles coming through, it's spending the time with them. It's really talking about things in multiple forms and fashion in different arenas, and making sure that this is at their core, and one of their it's not really a core value, but it is, in that aspect too, really, that the decisive leadership model is part of their DNA.
Perfect. So how do you couple that, right? Like the decisive decision maker with the unstoppable collaboration, right? Like team player, because it is a delicate balance, right? Where we're having to make decisions. We can't have groupthink where we have 150 employees all providing their input. That's where that decisive decision making needs to take hold. But yet we still have to get that pulse of not only our internal, so I just use the number 150 employees, understanding what those 150 employees are thinking and feeling, but also how do you really be that team player, and what are some things to think about and look for from a collaboration perspective? And it's more than obviously telling people what to do. We don't want somebody that's in there in a dictator or just dictating every single action every single day. It's more so like active listening, understanding in your one-on-ones or your quarterly conversations with your team, really what's going on, and what those employees need and what they're hearing. They're kind of the heartbeat of the organization because they're typically boots on the ground, and really understanding either what's going on in the manufacturing production floor, out in the field, or if it's a tech environment, really what's changing and evolving that tech environment, right? Like they know oftentimes, and it's up to that leader to really understand and listen to them, in terms of what is going on in and outside that environment. And that's taking those ideas and those actions and that feedback and putting them forward is really what's going to make a pretty remarkable leader inside an ESOP organization. And it improves team effectiveness, right? If somebody is really seeing that their voice is getting heard and maybe not every idea or every thought is getting implemented, but at least there's value around that listening and that collaboration that's going on. It's super important. So some things that we like to educate on is that active listening piece that Bill had mentioned before, is critical, so critical. And how do they take action and cite examples of when did you get feedback from your team? How did you get feedback from your team? And then how did you move things forward? Are things that we typically look for, right? In terms of that leader skill set. So it's, keeping team members focused on those critical timelines and moving forward in terms of their accountabilities, but also slowing them down from time to time and really understanding what's going on. How are we going to get to our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year target as an organization, and taking that feedback in stride. Bill, I don't know if you have anything to
Yeah.
add to this one.
No, and this is the core of kind of that active listening bullet point too, right? So if they're not actively listening and hearing what's going on, then they can't take that next step. They can't be that decisive manager. They can't have that unstoppable collaboration. So the listening piece is so innate, and a lot of leaders can get ahead of their skis a little bit, right? So it's like we gotta go, 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 and making sure that we're making the right decisions at the right time with the right information is so important.
Perfect. And then building lasting relationships. This is partly like kind of touches on the core value side of things a little bit, just in terms of how this person shows up inside the organization and how they go about building trust and rapport cross-functionally, right? Those relationships obviously are the foundation of a successful business, right? So whether it's somebody new that's coming in, and they have to build trust and rapport over the course of the first 30, 60, 90, 180 days and onward, or somebody that has some of the institutional knowledge and they're continuing to build out those relationships and take new people in and under their wing. How do they approach that? How have they been effective previously in terms of building teams and developing employees and approaching peers, or if they have to present to the board, how are they building relationships with the board? All those different avenues are things that you should be thinking about in terms of this person's approach. How do they show up? But yet, how do they also give credit and empower their other team members or delegate some of those tasks to other team members or give opportunity inside organization? A good leader is going to do those things, in terms of understanding where their high potentials sit, and building those relationships and really training and developing those folks into those opportunities. So that prioritizing development, and really developing those new strengths of their team, is also critically important. So it's not just about how they show up, but it's also how they empower others and how then those team members show up. And then you create this beautiful environment where you have 150 employee owners that are kind of all doing the same thing, and showing up and seeing that they all have opportunity to make an impact on the business. And then lastly, sustainability skills. These are things that, again, like Bill said, I wish I had a magic question or a magic potion on like how to clearly vet for some of these things. But it's that humbleness, right? It's that self-awareness, how that person shows up, whether it's the interview process or if they're an internal candidate, how others have seen or perceived them show up, right? Are they self-aware? Do they understand where their gaps are and where their development opportunities are? And can they speak to those things, right? And do they seek feedback? Do they take 360 surveys seriously and really adjust and adapt to the feedback that they've been given or coaching that they've been given? Again, it goes back to kind of being that team player and that continuous improvement mindset that we know are key values to ESOP organizations. It's how does this individual candidate approach those things? And how do they really adapt and grow, not only as the organization grows, but themselves personally and professionally. Bill, I don't know if you have anything to add to this one.
No, this is for sure that sustainability skills is so important because that's your longevity, right? That this is the kind of bedrock that you're putting the foundation down for your organization to continue to take that next step into the next level of your growth trajectory. And so it's going to be continually important to reinforce that over and over, not even at the hiring process time, although obviously that's a heavy time, but
Yeah.
and every meeting you have, every subsequent strategy session you have as well.
It's ongoing, right? And this
Absolutely.
is something that should be built into performance development, performance improvement as well. Lastly, unique values and culture, right? So things to think about as we're bringing this kind of fills out that whole pie chart as you're evaluating the ESOP leader is how do they tie back to our values and our culture that we've established as an organization, right? Can they lead with an ownership mindset? Are they a part of that trust and transparency from a culture standpoint? And how do they empower that shared success, right? I have kind of highlighted there and in italicized the collaborate across roles and levels. It's kind of the point of this whole presentation, right? Is how does this person work within that employee-owned environment? How do they collaborate? How do they communicate? And how do they help that organization grow to that next level, as Bill had just mentioned there. And then grow people in the enterprise. Are they invested in the growth of others, not only themselves, but the growth of others and the growth of the organization? And are they self-aware, right? In terms of where they're at inside the organization, and really support, whether the board is giving them feedback or the CEO, or if they're in a director position and they're reporting to a VP, how do they take that coaching and mentorship and apply it is going to be super important. And so I think really honing in on kind of these 4 buckets through the course of the interview process is going to be critically important to understand how this person shows up. Bill, anything to add on values and culture?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing, remember when we went back to that pie chart we spoke about earlier, this is kind of like a non-negotiable piece, right? So, and I hear a lot in the ESOP world is we want people to come in and fit into our culture and core values. And so I would kind of take that to the next level. You don't want somebody just to come in and fit. You want somebody to come in and be a culture add as well, right? So yes, you want to have some resonation of the same culture and core values because that's kind of who they are at their core. But you're also looking for someone that's going to come in and continue to enhance that culture, right? So that the core value pieces where they get misaligned, that gets flushed out pretty early, in a process of vetting candidates to see if they're congruent with the organization. But really where we see the home runs is they're coming in, they're not only resonating with those values, but they're coming in and being a culture add, right? So they're bringing something even more, a little more energy or a little more this or that, or all the good things that TJ's talked about, that's going to help that company continue to grow and scale. That's one part about bringing in some new folks as well.
Perfect. And then Maria, I think we have our final polling question.
Yeah, I've got that last polling question pulled up for everybody. Kind of going over, like, from your personal perspective, which leadership skill set do you believe is most critical in your company's current growth phase? Those answer choices are strategic decision making under pressure, collaborative team development, building trust and effective relationships, and then that last one, sustainable leadership practices. This is our final and third polling question for the day. Looks like everybody's responding pretty well. And then I'll invite everybody, if it's okay with you guys, to share a leadership skill that maybe in the last month has been challenging, something that's come up for you and your team. If it's not you individually, somebody you work alongside, just get that open conversation going in the chat to just kind of see. You'll notice probably others are in the same boat as you when it comes to certain things. It looks like I've got 80% of you answered. I'm going to do last call for this polling question before we move on. Feel free to throw those answers in the chat. Okay, and then I'll share those results out, and while we look over those results, we'll also look over some of those chat responses.
That's great.
Awesome.
Good spread
100%
on
correct.
results. Yeah.
100% correct on everybody. Awesome. There's no right answer on this, right? It's really all of those things. And so it's important, and all of the things that we're seeing out there kind of resonate with what we've talked about today, right? A good balance in all of those pieces. So it's cool to see different things coming in the chat too. Building
So
trust, conflict resolution, effective communication.
yeah, for sure.
Makes sense.
So the last piece is okay. You know, I'll transition to it here. So we have to make a decision, right? We're growing as an organization. We have to make a decision. We got to bring somebody in. How do we go about setting this up? What should we be thinking about when we do identify a gap as we need a new hire, right? Or somebody leaves the organization, and we have to backfill them or we have to replace them. From an HR perspective or even a leadership perspective, executive leadership team, what is our process going to look like in terms of how to fill that particular role, right? Obviously, you have to take into consideration, are we going to take internal applicants? Do we feel like we have people that we can open it up to internally? I always recommend that as a first step, or any step along the way, just to give opportunities, especially in employee-owned environments, to those people from within. But it's also how are we going to approach the search holistically? And again, these things are going to change whether you're at a foundational level, an emerging level, an enterprise level. These things are going to get more complex as you move up that scale in terms of who is involved and when, right? But what we don't want and what we don't recommend is that these decisions are made in a silo where it's all on either the HR person, or it's all independently on, in this case, like a finance and administration leader, right? Because we have to take into consideration where that role fits on the accountability chart, who interacts with that role, to ultimately get to how do we cross collaborate in terms of who should sit in on the interviews. Beyond HR, right? So if we're hiring for our VP of operations and the sales and marketing and finance person are going to be peers, are they the ultimate decision maker? No, that's probably still the CEO that would be making that call as a direct report. But the finance and sales and marketing leader, what the CEO should do and HR should do is really understand, what are you both looking for? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Providing insight, input into that, so it's not just a one size fits all decision-making process. So that's what we're trying to illustrate here with this graphic in terms of involvement of employee owners in a decision or in a hiring process. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'd say that if there's one thing that you could take away from today's discussion is this, really, like, change the game if you're not there, right? Like, it's hard as a smaller company growing into a larger company and are used to doing everything and making all those decisions, right? Is how do you include your team and how do you get better decision making as a group in that in your ESOP? And it's true for any company. But what we see some of the pitfalls is you're used to making all the decisions and it kind of happens in a vacuum, like TJ said before, and then you're wondering why it kind of doesn't work out, or they're not a good culture fit, or they're not a good culture add, or they're not a good listener or decision maker. We want to take a lot of swings at the candidates that are coming through internally and external in a process of vetting as you're growing and scaling your company, right? So that makes a lot of good input, a lot of good discussion. And so if we want to share the last slide, TJ, I'd like to just kind of talk about some practical things that you can do, right? So how do you do this? And so this has been kind of a process that we've continued to refine in our company over the last 23 years. We've continued to work with ESOPs and made some mistakes and had some successes and continue to have this area of expertise. But where it comes in is like number one, we're gonna make we need to make a hire, internal or external. We're on a growth trajectory. How do we do this? All right. So create a plan, right? So get a plan in place. A normal kind of executive leadership or leadership process can sometimes take 4 or 5 months, right? And so that's a long time, and it seems like a long time, but actually, if you have a plan and you execute it well, it goes really well, and you have an outcome that's very satisfactory to the growth of your organization. Okay, so what I'd encourage you to do is, create a search committee. So we're deciding, let's just decide, hey, we need we're a growing company. We now need to move from a controller to a CFO. We need to do a CFO search. Okay, so we need to get this thing kicked off, right? So we're going to identify a search committee, and that's an internal committee. Who's going to make the decision? Who's the ultimate decision maker? Who's this person report to? Who are the people that are going to be around that person to help interview and to move these things forward? Okay, so this is that search committee that we're going to recommend you put together early, and identify a coordinator or project lead. So put a timeline together, right? Then this coordinator is going to help be a good communicator for what's happening. It's a big inflection point at times for your organization to bring in a new position or a promotional position, or there's something this is pretty impactful for your ESOP. And sometimes people don't think it's very impactful, but it is, right? People are nervous. New leadership comes in, that means they're saying like, gosh, what happens? What about me, right? That's their first reaction. What about my role? And really this may or may not impact their role at all. So having good communication inside and outside the organization just sets up everybody for success. Okay, and especially that new candidate coming in. The coordinator for all that feedback, right? So there might be feedback coming from different folks that we're going to interview this candidate and a group of candidates, right? And so how do you kind of coordinate all of that feedback and get it to one funnel is really great, and handling details on hiring come after the fact. But
real quick,
that's that coordinator. Quick. Yeah, go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, real quick, Bill, about like coordination of all feedback. I think there is a lot of great systems and tools too that can be leveraged from an HRIS perspective in terms of providing, ability for people that are going to be involved on the committee to put notes into the system in real time. That makes it easier for HR to kind of track what was discussed, how it was discussed through the course of the interview process, but also at the end of it, when you're evaluating candidates, it's just a good way to make sure that we've collected pretty consistent notes and feedback along the way. So we have a couple of clients that do an amazing job of that and providing real-time feedback and leveraging their systems and tools to do so. So I highly recommend putting some systems and tools in place where you can take real-time notes, put real-time feedback. And it doesn't have to be you're sitting across from the candidate typing notes, but building time on the back end, 15, 20 minutes to really play back the conversation rather than recall it, 3 to 5 business days later or 2 weeks later as the process starts to flush out.
You bet. You bet. Well said, TJ. We don't want this to be an overwhelming process. Like there, and, that we've learned, and the technology is improving all the time. So how do we leverage those pieces too? It's really, really helpful. Okay. Next bullet is really talking about kind of, who will interview that person, right? So this is the search committee plus a lot of other folks. And why do you do this? So we want to take, like we said, lots of swings at the group of candidates that are going to come through and be top candidates for your organization. So that could be internal candidates, it may be external candidates. But what we want to do is have a process that you're identifying the ultimate decision maker. And in this situation, it'd be the CEO, most likely because the CFO would be reporting to that person. Okay. But, what other peers, what other of this position are going to talk with them, right? So what other staff? Let's put together some group meetings with staff with these candidates, other employee owners, right? And more inclusion, the better. Number one, couple things. They get exposure. These candidates get exposure to your organization even deeper at so many different levels. When they are hired, if they're coming from the outside, they're hitting the ground running, right? They've built relationships through the interview process. They've already kind of squashed some of those fears of a new person coming in. If it's an internal person, then that also is a trajectory of one of those harder things to do as an internal candidate, is to become someone's boss that used to be your peer, right? So how does that happen? And having a very thorough process of interviewing and vetting of these candidates really gives you. Okay. Also, I want to get them in front of board members or other consultants and other key leaders and that may be outside your organization that are influential in your organization. So makes a huge opportunity. TJ, anybody I missed on?
No, I mean, I think it's obviously being very clear up front, that as that coordinator or project leader, like whose role is what, right? In terms of overall influence as it relates to a particular position. And sometimes, at the executive level, you're going to get the board's involvement. Other times, if it's a manager, director level, maybe not so important, right? But it's just really understanding who is doing what through the course of that process, and communicating that out, and being fully transparent as the position goes live or comes to be, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, awesome. And then lastly, just create that timetable of activities, right? So this is just going to be really important to make sure everybody's on board with what's happening. And usually you kind of start from your ideal start date and then work backwards, knowing that it's going to take you a few months to get through this process. You have, sourcing and reaching out to candidates. You'd have candidates, applying. Then you would also have your interview first, second rounds, final rounds. So that can take some time. So if you're looking at your ideal start date and kind of work backwards, would be a good time to start, build that timetable of activities. It keeps things moving and really creates an objective evaluation process for the candidates coming through. So hopefully that's helpful in the aspect of creating a plan and getting after it. And you may or may not be in that mode already. So congratulations if you are, and if there's some nuggets that you can pick up and move forward on your next hire, it's been really helpful.
Awesome. I think we have about 2 minutes, but if there was anything that popped into the Q&A.
Yeah, if folks have got questions, now's a great time to throw them at our presenters in our last few minutes here. Really appreciate all the honesty in the chat and just bringing your challenges forward to the webinar today. There's a lot of great content in there. So if you are like, I want to see these slides or I want to write more down and I didn't get to, know you can follow up and write things down and download the presentation for your own note taking. But I'll leave it to you guys in our last few minutes. If there's anything you want to wrap up with, share out.
No, I just want to thank you everybody for joining us. If there's tools that we can share with you, feel free to reach out. Happy to do that. and happy to help you through any of these processes. So.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Bill had to say there is, we don't expect everybody to have all the answers. It's a delicate thing, right? In terms of how to go about it, how to approach it, how to think about it. And if you're just kind of starting, in terms of your journey, and I might have the right team, I might not, we're always open to having conversations and helping. So.
Well, then with that, we'll say thank you everybody for being here, taking an hour out of your Tuesday, joining us, following along and participating. If you've got questions, reach out. You'll be hearing from me later this afternoon with some follow-up resources. But I hope everybody has a great rest of their Tuesday. We will see you in future webinars and hopefully some in-person events there too. And yeah, just have a great Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Maria.
Yep, have a good one.
Bye.